Hey, all right, ready in three, two, one. And I believe we are live. Garrett, why don't you kick us off?
Welcome back to another office hours with Lucid and friends. And by friends, we mean each other. We're on a
We're,
ship.
we're our friend. We are the friends.
We're on a ship, the SS Friendship.
Oh man.
You'll,
Actually, it's funny is that when we started last year, it was really just us and your past clients or whatever folks that came along. Now we're planning the Lucid dinner this year, and it's a big list like of people who are in Austin that we're helping. It's like we're gonna have to get a big table. Like that's that, and most of them are recurring clients too. This is actually it's good stuff.
yeah. The real fundraise is the friends we made along the way.
No, I think the real fundraise is the millions of dollars they've raised. That is absolutely the real fundraise, which happened a lot last year. That was a very cool thing that happened. But this is not a reflection of last year. This is a discussion for what's to come. So, Garrett, what is the topic for today?
Yes, we are talking about what happens when your audience just don't get it when you talk.
We'll,
Sorry, I
we'll be
just
back next week, folks. Don't worry.
in,
This
in in our last meeting, Brian and I came from a work meeting into this meeting. In our last meeting, we were both yawning and falling asleep. So you can see he got some coffee. I drank some pre-workout because I didn't have time to make a pot. So we're setting the tone for
right. Right. So this is one of those things that we have found our way in, and it's almost like I don't know, it's like we're finding our niche almost not really by accident, but it's like not what I would have chosen last year. Like if I would have went down and said, "Oh, what was Lucid going to be known for in a year?" Even though we knew our alpha, which is evident, right? And even though it's clarity, it's really coming down to actually the two real things is being really, really good at pitch decks and being really, really good at outbound messaging. And the common core thread between the two of those things is really being able to say a statement that the other person on the other side, who you may not know, who you in cold outreach definitely don't know, and then investors, even if they know you, they probably don't care, gets them to go and go, hmm. Like it's one of those hits, right? Investment decks, you need to have quite a few of those moments for it to really hit off. Cold messaging, you get one thing there, right? And you just do that. And so we've really locked into trying to make the value absolutely totally obvious. Like that is the prime directive. And so what we've noticed with a lot of it, especially with folks that we're about to engage with or doing, or about to do work with, is really when you're saying something and they're just not getting it, right? And like this is not a problem that is a bad part. Because let me tell you who I'm not really talking to right now. There are people whose products just are good products, right? They have not solved the problem. Like if you like I have my business model philosophy, right, which goes through and says that there's certain levels you need to solve your business at before you can progress to the next level, right? You need to understand a lot of core foundations about your business, what your personal motivations are, what you're doing before the business actually starts. You need to decide on your business model, who you're actually targeting, and really specific, what value you're trying to solve for them specifically. There's a lot of decisions there. Then there's a whole product development phase that goes underneath that. And that is its own thing, right? That's not a messaging problem. There's some people who think they have a messaging problem, but really no, the product sucks or it's the wrong market. They don't care, or whatever. We're not talking about those folks. That's not who we deal with. We deal with people who their business models are well understood, their products are good, and often we've had a lot of our clients have millions in sales before they come to us, right? So they do, so they like they're off, they're in the market, they're doing stuff. And yet, for some reason, you talk to it, and very important people just don't understand what you're talking about, right? It's those people that it's really particularly interesting, and one that we've done quite a lot of work with here. So, Garrett, where do you want to take this discussion? You usually have something you want to noodle on.
yeah, I got you on that. First check and make sure that we're live because I don't think we are. But the
We are definitely live.
I cannot see the live stream on LinkedIn, so
Oh, interesting. Well, I can see. Yeah, it says current viewers.
Okay,
current viewers are lower than the list.
that's
Yeah.
fine. Then I am just locked out of it, but that's okay. It's not the end of the world. Sorry about that, live viewers who are definitely there for real. Um, so, so what we're basically, let's talk about what does it mean for your messaging to work, right? This is going to be a little bit meta, but here's if you indulge a little bit meta of a conversation, you're going to have a much better understanding of messaging. This is the thing. Messaging is de facto meta, right?
Mhm.
In a perfect world, we would say whatever words we felt like saying, and the people that we're talking to would immediately understand what we were thinking about, as if through telepathy. We don't live in that world. And so, as a consequence, you have a variety of variables that include, but are not limited to, the way that you think about the thing that you're talking about, the words that you choose to communicate the thing that you're talking about, the medium in which the thing that you're talking about is communicated. Is it spoken? Is it written? Is it sung in a song? Right? The words that the person you're talking to hears and the concepts in the head of the person that you're talking to associated with those words, right? There's at least five areas of friction here, right? So, like, for example, I could be imagining a tree, right? I can say, hey, look, a tree. That can get recorded in some other format, and maybe it's social media and it like got recorded as a video, but it gets put up next to an image of a coat tree instead of whatever tree you thought I was talking about, which we haven't specified, right? Brian hears me say, hey, look, a tree, and sees this coat tree, and so the mental image that's conjured in his head is of a coat tree, right? And in
So,
fact, I was talking about a factor tree. You weren't expecting that because it wasn't specified, right? But the point with that is there's a bunch of areas that you can miscommunicate stuff. And this is probably the like biggest overlap between like the philosophy stuff that I used to do and pitching and communication stuff is that you like really rigorously thinking about how concepts are formed in the mind improves your ability to communicate substantially. So we establish it at the baseline level. There are a lot of places that your messaging can screw up, right? We also have to establish what's the intent of the messaging, right? Are we trying to teach someone something? Are we trying to persuade someone of something? These are two different things in most cases, right? Now, if I was a college professor in the 60s, I might be trying to teach people stuff that is also persuading them to go like become a reactionary of some sort, right? But
mhm.
generally speaking, teaching is one thing, persuasion is another. For you, entrepreneurs, you want to be in the business of persuasion. Teaching's cool when you have a giant budget and 10 years to convert a growing future market, you can educate more. However, really, 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 your easiest thing, if you're having problems with your messaging, the problem is probably that you're educating, and the problem is also probably that you're not persuading. And if you're not persuading, you're not focused on solving a real problem that somebody already has. You might be trying to teach somebody that they have a problem or educate somebody on a topic that they might want to do something about in the future. That's cool. That does not convert to action right now, right?
Mhm.
If I come to the doctor and I have cancer, no. If I come to the doctor and I have a broken arm and I smoke 3 packs a day, right? You can say, hey, you should stop smoking so much. And I'm sitting here holding my arm, which is broken, right? I'm going to be repelled because I'm trying to sit here and smoke a cigarette while I'm waiting for someone to fix my arm, which is broken, right?
Mhm.
Now, in the long run, is it more important that I stop smoking 3 packs a day than it is that I get my arm attended to? Yeah, probably. But that requires education, which is a long-term process, and that doesn't really get the thing fixed right now, right? I want my arm fixed because I'm in pain, right?
Right, right. So let's talk a little bit about messaging. And so we are not live right now. So don't worry. We're recording though. So we're gonna get the good content. Good content's coming up here. But the So I was on your account when I went live. So we were live on your account for a period, but not on the actual live stream. So, uh,
Interesting.
and now we're not able to live stream right now, unable to live stream because I update the streaming URL and streaming key. Okay, here we go. So I need to update it real quick. So let's take a quick pause here. This is good stuff though. I like what you're talking about. I'm sorry, this is such a shit show, but it's so fun.
Okay, this is meant to be.
I know, right?
Oh, it's now too hot. Molly, I'm sweating.
We got the recording.
Ah.
We're just gonna start the discussion. Whatever. Whatever. Fuck it. We'll do it live.
Fucking do it live.
Do it live. Fuck it. All right.
Fucking thing sucks.
Let's see Okay, we're good. So ready, and we're gonna clear out in 3, 2, 1.
A little bit longer than that, I think, but
11 minutes and 24 seconds.
yeah.
All right.
Oh, we're definitely
So
live now.
we're definitely live now. Okay. So sorry for the confusion. We were talking to briefly Garrett's account with no title, just you can apparently just go live whenever you want and just start talking. I may do this in the future for some. And Garrett had a wonderful point that is going to be recorded. We'll get that out
The
later.
lost episode that you'll
A
see
lot,
in
the
micro content later.
last time. The real important point to mention here is that Garrett and I are both very, very tired. We are started this year. We are like I don't know what lucky fucking bell we ran in November or whatever, but the time at which everything should have been dying, everything kind of sped up, and now the time at which everything should be picking back up, it's just kind of overloading. So we're busy in the best way possible, and also New Year's resolution. I'm waking up at 5, and there's a adjustment period where your body just doesn't really doesn't want to do that for a period. So we're kind of forced to that. So anyway, we're talking about message. We're talking about messaging, and specifically what happens when your audience or the people that you need to get the message just don't get it? So the big exclusion here is sometimes the product just sucks. There's some other issue or whatever, but we're talking specifically to people where that's not the issue. And like I said earlier, we have a lot of clients that have sold millions in some cases, millions of dollars, where they have one part, like their audience gets it and they love it, their investors do not, right? Or you start speaking about it, and even though you know it's working intuitively, you got that sense as an entrepreneur when things are working, right? And doing that. And then you go to a group and you start talking about all the wonderful things, and they're just like not getting it. And you're like, what the hell? That's the sort of messaging we're talking about here. So Garrett, you had a point you mentioned before we got the live stream actually going, that we were kicking into. Start riffing on that. I'll dial you in
I'm gonna Cliff's Notes this. If you are hearing this right now and you want to hear the thing that I talked about for the first 10 minutes of this is like really technical, how your brain experiences communication. I'm not going to do that whole thing again, but
Yes.
Cliff's Notes of that is there are a number of points in the process of communication that is really just the mismatch between the idea that you have in your head, the words you have associated with the idea, the medium you choose to express those words, the words that the other person hears, and the concepts that that person has in their head associated with the words that they received, right? For example, if you see a picture of the beach on a full page ad with no words on it, it's not advertising anything. Even if it's like trying to get you to like want to go to Fiji, right? You don't know where it is looking at it. It doesn't have a call to action. There's no contextual information, whatever, right? So all persuasion occurs through words. While there are other parts of persuasion that are actually more important, like tone, body language, whatever, this is where design comes in if you're doing print or digital stuff. The words are the part that do the persuading at the end of the day. You have to structure the concepts in someone's mind so that they can perform a set of actions, right? So again, this something I did say that I will repeat. This is super meta and super heady. And if you're willing to indulge that this is super meta and heady, this is the way that you actually have to think about messaging. Like to really, really get into what makes it good or bad requires you to have a pretty good theory of mind for yourself and other people. And so this is
Right.
where people screw up, right? This is the beginning of where people screw up, right? Communication requires you to understand a lot of things to be effective. You have to understand what is the subject matter you're trying to communicate, right? What is the nature of the medium you're communicating in? If I'm talking, okay, statistic depends on what I'm trying to sell you, but if speaking is the medium that I chose, having a deeper voice is more persuasive than not, right? Sorry, if you have like Kristen Chenoweth voice, you are not going to be persuasive in compared to Tony Robbins, who sounds like a fucking golem, right?
Right.
Um, there's a reason why he's one of the best salespeople in the world, right? So that's a medium limitation, right? Gilbert Gottfried, probably not persuasive, very, very funny, right? Um, you have other constraints. What are the words that you're using? One of the biggest things that people screw up is they use words that either are too big or uncommon, right? Or they use words that don't convey what the recipient thinks they mean, right? So there's a really important point here, which is connotation versus denotation, right? Connotation is what we all agree the word means in practice, right? Denotation is what the word literally means, right? So actually, the denotation of literal means, literal. The connotation of literal means like a lot, right?
No, there's okay, connotate. Oh God, there's so many good versions of that, but like God,
Often people don't mean literal when they say literal, right?
no. Like yeah, yes, that's accurate. Yes,
You're literally killing me right now, Brian.
I know. I know. My brain is fucking mashed potatoes right now.
No,
Literally mashed
I was just
potatoes.
using that as an example.
I
That
know.
was I was the connotation, not the denotation. The So that's really, 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 really important because you have to have like this is like what I would call like understanding connotation is like cultural literacy, right? Or knowing your audience. So jargon is one of the things that floats around in connotation denotation, right? Um, if you are doing something very particular in a particular industry, you can use jargon. And actually, what I like to draw the distinction between jargon and buzzwords, which is jargon is bad but necessary, stupid shit that people have to say, and buzzwords are bad and unnecessary, right? Like
Right,
saying,
right.
talking about we're gonna find we're gonna open the kimono and find some global synergies between our cross-functional teams, right? Like
It's psychopath language. It's Patrick Bateman language where it's like you have no thoughts, there's no ideas, and like if you're a serious person, you can spot them directly. However, actually, I've learned one of the very, very important uses of jargon, particularly when you are this. Okay, so I found actually a very specific messaging thing, which I'm on a project right now that I'm kicking off, which is basically creating a outbound system for a an IT consultant, right? He's very specific and he is not in finance, but he helps people in finance, right? And he tends to talk to folks in that world. We have kind of identified that there is going to be a level of jargon that is necessary to talk about that is going to seem inauthentic isn't the right term, but it's going to be used in such a way that when we make contact with people who are that we think could potentially be his clients, that we are signaling we get it, right? Because one of the key pains that they realize is that they work with a lot of people in finance, work with technologists who do not understand their field at all. By being able to use the jargon of the field and accurately, right? Where you can use it there. They're not expecting them to be full experts, but it's like if you can actually know the difference between a balance sheet and an income statement, if you know what type of reports are, you're like, oh, you're fluent in this, right? You do that. There's all of a sudden a point where like that's trust building. All of a sudden it's like, oh shit, you understand this in a way most people don't.
yeah, you're describing yet a third thing in the category of buzzwords, jargon, and shibboleths. So So this is actually really important. This is a wild word. A shibboleth is a word that signifies in-group belonging, right? So the word comes from some like Israelite biblical story where the Jews were fighting with some similar looking but different Semitic tribe. And the way that they distinguished themselves, because there was a bunch of spies, was asking them to say the word shibboleth, which if you said it in the Canaanite or whoever Moabite accent, you said it wrong, and then they would kill you, right? So what it really means is a word that signifies you're part of the club, right? You have some special membership here. And I think this is more of a thing than people realize, that there are words that signify, if you know, if you're one of our clients runs a hedge fund, right? He uses a bunch of words that I don't know the meaning of, that if you're talking to a hedge fund guy, you would assume that they know, like um the Greeks in derivatives, right? You
Well,
have like
yeah,
delta and
yeah.
gamma and vemma or something, vana.
I mean, it's like if I'm talking to for actually, here's the thing is like that first off, I like that term. We should talk more about that because that's a really interesting
What about
topic.
shibboleths or about the Greek?
Shibboleths. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Right. But it's more like the two people who are talking would call it more like they would describe it as a vibe. There's not specific words that are in there, right? That's just oh they usually oh they get it right. Like okay, so like what in groups am I naturally? I'm a software developer, so that's a group that I naturally talk with. And particularly if we start talking like data analytics and development, there starts to be words there. And there's just a comfort and familiarity you get to with it where it's like, oh, what technologies I work with? Oh, I was working with, I was building on Red Hat and I was doing I did Redshift and AWS. And like I can also start using these terms, right, to describe it. To me, I'm not trying to fit in. I'm just saying my experience, and there's kind of this collection that comes in, right? And that's people of the same type, right? When you are an outsider and you're trying to establish like you belong with somebody, right? And do this by showing familiarity, you're kind of showing I get your world, right? Particularly if for that individual, lots of people don't get it. Like the only reason this is going to work here, or I think this is going to work, is because we're talking to a group who has been burned by IT so many damn times that they're like, I don't trust it, right? Because I know I'm going to spend 4 weeks trying to explain something to you, only to realize that it's not going to end up anywhere, right? To do this. Also, if you start the relationship off by using that language, using it off, we'll call it using it authentically. I don't think that's the right term. That's how they would describe it, but basically describing the words right. All of a sudden now you've bridged some tone here where you've moved beyond buzzwords and and even jargon, and it's like, oh, you get this. So if I talk to you, you're going to understand it, right? It's like we speak a similar dialect.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because the incorrect use of shibboleths is like you will quietly be excluded permanently from something. So like you can imagine, this is true to some extent if you're pitching VCs and they ask you like for a specific thing, they're like, oh, what's the CAGR, right? What's your market cap? What's stuff like that. If you don't know that stuff and you indicate you don't, like if you answered the question of like what's a CAGR for this industry, and they're like, and you said, what does that mean? You've immediately outed yourself as like an amateur, even though that may not necessarily be your job to know that in the grand scheme of things. Like, hey, I built this really cool piece of tech. I don't know what the CAGR is, but it's awesome. Like, you know what I mean?
Right, right.
Which CAGR is current annual growth rate, right? Cumulative
Yeah,
annual, whatever.
it's rather
Yeah,
standardized industry to industry and whatever.
yeah.
And yeah, it's something investors care a great deal about and is a general indicator for you if you're in a wormhole. However, most startups naturally already don't. Like if you build a AI SaaS product, you can know the CAGR, but it's like, okay, you're playing in the right well. That tells us nothing about your business, right? But they care that you know this information, right? It's a
Because
qualifier.
it's what's happening is there's an invisible exchange, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you'll get like visible disgust or displeasure, right? But there's an invisible exchange that's happening where they're putting you in a bucket or not in a bucket.
Right.
If you say the right stuff, you either don't get taken out of the bucket of like viable things, or you get put into the bucket of people that are trusted, right? So this, the most abstract version of this, or I think the most like one that probably people get abstractly, but may or may not have a huge amount of experience with, is like, um, so I was at a venture studio, and I had done something in their pitch contest. I was talking to the people that ran the venture studio afterwards. They were to talk about some stuff, right? And one of the people is a, yeah, she's slightly older than me, young woman, but she mentioned in her background about having gone to this preposterous, like magical school that like winters in the Alps or something like that. And that was like, hey, here's a sub-communication class signal where this person grew up far richer than anyone I've ever met, right? Things like that are part of this whole like interaction of communication. There are class signals. Like you can imagine somebody that grew up playing polo, even though that technically has nothing to do with anything, is like clearly that's a, you know, or like water polo, especially. I don't know. That seems like bougie, right? Lacrosse, um, doing equestrian stuff. Those are automatically like higher class signals that are
Right.
shibboleths in some regard. And like
Right.
knowing
Right.
the intimate details of lacrosse, if somebody's like, "Oh, hey, did you see such and such?" You know, yeah, Stanford played Yale in lacrosse. Like, okay, cool. You're signaling something, right?
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
the point of that is it's important to understand that there are a lot of things being communicated when you're talking that don't necessarily include the information that you're trying to convey, right?
Right. And so
People who
like,
are go ahead.
no, well, I was gonna say, so it's like if we're talking about actual like, okay, so what are we really trying to do with any sort of messaging that we're trying to get at? And this is one thing I have to like, I'm constantly reiterating as part of the process. It's something that I got from like, I can't think of the name of the book right now, but ClickFunnels guy. I can't think of it.
Aubrey Suvi or
Yeah,
the
Suvi, right. He said probably one of my favorite lines, and I repeat it all the time, which is the point of the web page is not to make the sale. The point of the ad is not to make the sale. It's like the point, every piece of content, everything you do has a job. This LinkedIn live stream for us has a job or sometimes jobs, right? It doesn't have to be one thing, but there should be one chief among them that we say, this is the job this thing is doing. And that job is often it should be something quite tangible. You should be able to say it does this thing, right? And whatever. What I think a lot of mistakes come from is that when people are in a medium or whatever, they don't know the job they're trying to accomplish at that point. And that makes it hard for them to know what you should do. So what happens when you don't know the job? And this is like really common if like, and again, I think everyone's done this. We're doing it. It's like you get invited to a panel and you're like, oh, cool, I'm going to a panel. And you just answer questions. And sometimes that's a totally valid thing, right? Sometimes you're not supposed to, it's not supposed to do anything to your job. You're just going, hey, it's cool. I get invited to a panel. I'm doing this for a friend or whatever and you don't do that. However, if that was supposed to be lead generation for you, first off, you need to say, well, it needs to be lead generation. So what's the point of me being up in that panel? The point of that panel is that I want people to get interested in what I'm doing and either come see me afterwards, come do whatever, whatever. All of a sudden now we have an objective. And now all of a sudden that makes life way, way, way easier now, right? You do it, right? Some of the worst like to change mediums here, like some of the hardest website projects that I think I've done are ones where websites are just, it's just supposed to be there, right? Or whatever, or we should have a website, whatever. That's a really hard thing because like often what you're saying is that you're just trying to fit in, right? To do this. And again, there's some validity to that. Often though, if you're saying, well, I just have a website, you really haven't thought through like, okay, well, where is this going to be used, right? Like we have like our lowest pitch, our lowest offering for our website, right? 6,400. We just standardized all of our stuff is the brochure website, right? What is the purpose of that website? Well, let me tell you what it's used for or what people are going to do. If you're a consultant or an early stage startup or whatever, you're going to go be out in the world. Maybe you posted something on LinkedIn. Maybe you just had a news article about a raise that you just did, or maybe you're just, you did some PR or whatever. And somebody who is relevant to you notices you. And they go, oh, interesting. And you do it, I do it, everyone does it. What's the first thing you do? You go to either their social media. I'm on LinkedIn, so I go to LinkedIn. Maybe if you're on X or something like that, you'll go to their X profile, but generally for business, it's usually LinkedIn. And then you go check out their website. So at that point, what's happening? I've gone off and I've now am an individual who is interested in you, and I go to the website. What's the job the website's supposed to do? If you, Garrett, actively knew that Brian, somebody you want to get interested in, is now on your website, what do you really need that website to do? I
Um,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
actually, yeah, you answer.
yeah, there's a couple different things. But so if you anyone out here is a service provider listening to this, 80 plus percent of the time, the role your website plays is somebody has already interacted with you. They go to their website to feel like they did their homework, and then they
Ah,
were deliberating already that they were going to work with you, and now they're going to work with you, right? Because your website didn't scare them away.
so yeah, so
As
what's the
far
job
as
of the website in that case?
it's to reassure effectively, it's something like an objection handle, but it's really just reassurance.
It's reassurance.
Build confidence, whatever, to not uncheck any boxes for them. So, a great example of this,
Yeah.
one of our clients, Carwell Industries, when they first, this is before we had teamed up, but they first started talking to me, they had like a, 6-figure deal fall through. They were on a call. It was an awesome call. They do lighting and electrical for big factories. So these deals are all gigantic, right? And they're talking to these people, had a wonderful time. And then they went to their website. And then they never called them back because their website used
Yeah.
to be this like sepia 1-page Wix website that had a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge for some reason and nothing to do with anything that they did. It was very bad. So when they brought me on at the time, we built out a big, nice, robust website. Does that website have tons of traffic now? It's not like SEO optimized. They're not making web-based sales. In their industry, it's like person-to-person sales. What that website does for them is that when people go look at them, they don't lose business because of it. And in fact, it looks much, much better than everyone else that they're competing with. So they are now stand out in their industry. And as a consequence, their primary business partner or the people that they have an exclusive distributor agreement with, Motion, which is a massive multinational company, Motion loves them and loves to promote them because they look so good, right?
Right.
They do very good
So,
work.
so in that particular case, like somebody, what there is a job that website is doing, and you can think of where can this go off the rails, right? What happens there? Because the worst thing that can happen is they look at you and realize you're not serious, right? That's the worst thing that can happen on you there. They look at you, they see the website, and they go and say, oh, they can't even handle a fucking 5-page website. If they can't even handle having that and to do that, are there other issues, other things? Because you sounded good, but all of a sudden do you not have that, right? That's a problem you have, right? That's one job the website can do. There's another job that you can do with that website, which is basically saying, I've never seen you before, right? I can do this. They could just need to get some information on you, right? They could need to just to see what do you actually offer, right? And to do this. So they're basically looking, again, kind of that same job where it's like they're looking for reassurance to do that. So all of a sudden now we've taken the website and we've made a really defined objective of we need to make sure it does this job. All of a sudden now it becomes very clear. What should and now we get very tactical, right? What should the front page look like? What should the headlines be? What should we be saying in those headlines? Who should we be comparing ourselves to? It all of a sudden starts to point it. What you don't want to do is start off and say, we need a website and just whatever goes there. Those projects, I've been a part of those. It's not fun, right? And messaging on those tends to be horrendous because we don't know what target we're shooting for.
Yeah, that's for early stage, everything should serve the job of legitimacy when you're doing brand related stuff, right? So, super early stage, you don't need the world's best brand. You need a brand that doesn't look terrible, right? And now again, I as a designer, I would vastly prefer everyone went and got the world's best brand or like invested the time to make everything pretty and gorgeous. But in reality, that's not an efficient use of your capital or time. And the net benefit of that is just not there. So what you really have to do is do like what I call minimum viable brand, which is how do I get exactly the least that I need to get something that's good. So if you were bootstrapping and doing this, the easiest way to do this is go to Google Images, find a color palette that you like. There's also a website called coolers.co. Coolers, like colors, but cool, which I love and have a subscription to, but it generates complementary palettes for you. I use this when I do design work. So if you want to be a little fancier, you can go there. They also have a list of palettes on their website, whatever. Pick some. Cool, great. You got your brand colors, right? You go pick some fonts. I recommend you use Google Fonts if you're doing this on the cheap because they're already pre-installed in things like Figma or Canva or Webflow or whatever, right? Okay, great. You got your Google Fonts. Usually you want two. You can have more if you want to be really fancy, but two is correct. If you're very techie, do two sans serif. If you're very untechy, do two serif. If you're normal, do a serif and a sans serif paired together. You can look on Google Fonts or Google this, but figure out fonts that pair well together. There will be a list.
We got to turn that into a 5-day email course or something. That is that basic there. Because here's the thing. Like, look, this is the thing we've learned in our business. We serve startups or we serve people with limited resources, right? I come from the most influential book I think I've ever read about starting a business was The Hard Thing About Hard Things because Ben Horowitz fucking gets it. Because he's like, hey, yes, I would love to be a startup that has resources that we can be number one or number two in the industry. But some of us are just trying to make sure we don't have to lay off everyone next month. So, what's the plan when I'm just trying to make sure I don't starve to death, right? Here's the thing Garrett, I've seen him. He will make you beautiful, wonderful, fantastic brands. They will look phenomenal. They'll be great stories. You can take them to fucking design shows and show everyone how fancy your fucking business is. And if you're at the right stage, it is the right decision. But if you're a pre-seed startup and you're just trying to get going, it's like you should not be investing a ton of time in that. But there's certain like basics, right? We can give you guardrails where it's like, hey, here's the guardrails to get you to the point where you don't look like a buffoon. The pre-seed guys understand, yep, you're for real and we like your product and you can update your brand. And then you can go through. And that's honestly how most of our companies have gone through. Like we will, like again, one of our first Lucid clients, actually, we built a website knowing it's going to have to be redone at some point. We need to grow the company. There's a bunch of other things that we need to go through. And thank God, company has grown. It's done well. Now we're coming back. We're like, okay, version two. Let's do it even better this time, right? That's the sort of iterative process here. And honestly, as you were just talking about that, Gary, you just said this. That should be like a 5-day email course for pre-seed folks and or before pre-seed and be like, hey, just do this, make it easy and simple. And when you succeed and you've raised, come back to us and we'll make you something even better.
Yeah, I mean that's really it. Is just get how do you get minimum viable whatever? What's a minimum viable website? If I was doing it, I would do Webflow. I like Webflow. It makes markedly superior websites in terms of being pretty, but it's more difficult if it's hard for you, Wix or Squarespace. Don't use WordPress. WordPress is ass. It's also hard. Whether it seems like it's easy or not, like if you're doing something basic that doesn't need to have functionality, Wix or Squarespace, because they're easier.
Mhm.
But if you are a little bit more technical or you have a little bit more desire to make something that does not look mediocre, WordPress, Webflow, sorry,
Yeah.
everything on WordPress pretty much looks mediocre. Um,
Yeah, it's really the default design language
it's
on it.
well,
It's
it's
always
just it's a 20-year-old company, you know, if, or a 21-year-old company, I think now. So it's just not. I understand they patched it for 20 years, but Webflow is at least 10 years newer. It's superior.
yes.
So bam, right there. You could do all of that stuff in a weekend that I just described. You could do all this stuff. And actually, I've done this a bunch of times the last several years where I'll take a weekend and go spin up some startup idea and then just go workshop it around with people, right? If you're doing really, how do you test your communication? You go make a landing page for something, brand it as much as you can, right? And then go see if people will sign up. And then, hey, guess what? You just bootstrap past like, oh, I'm going to go build a product for 6 months and then see if people will pay for it. It's like, no, it's mock it up first, right? When I was raising for my last startup, we got, a $200,000 offer and I had nothing built. I had a 60 app screen mock-up, but it was a mock-up, right? And of course, I have a design background that's easier for me. But like if you didn't, you could go get a UI kit and do the same exact thing with Figma, which is free, right?
Yep.
And there you go, you're rolling. So the point of this is just you need to be able to test stuff. We're kind of getting off track off track
No,
from
but
everything, but I want
it's
to.
This is more interesting than I mean, the main topic's interesting, but just that, which I've never heard you say, because again, I know what it looks like to do it the best and right way. I also know we deal with people who just flat out don't have the resources to do the best. Even if they are smart and they're doing it the right way, like, and they are capable, it's just not a good use of resources. Like getting a better brand. Because there's the other problem that people run into, which is like they start to play entrepreneur more than actually do the work of entrepreneurship, right? Which is like, unfortunately, getting a cool brand is one of those activities, right? That people can kind of go and say, it's so pretty, our website's so nice, and they invest $50,000 in that and still don't have anything worth selling, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing too, is you have to think like there's a cost associated with not having it. That's the price of what you should be paying. If it is not a net positive of this is the revenue we're going to make from investing in this website or brand or whatever. Brand's really hard to quantify, but like website, you can at a certain type of website, you can quantify the ROI on it. If you
Mhm.
just like, hey, for Carwell, they lost out on a couple $100,000 because their website sucked, right? So did if it was me now, I would have charged more for that website. But that website is automatically more valuable than someone else's because that's how much value they're losing by not having it good. It'd be different if they were, if they did smaller contract sizes, you could can imagine them doing an e-commerce website that could actually generate revenue for them, in which case that website could be worth a lot more, right? Um, but the point there is you don't want to go spend $50,000 on a website if the website is not going to go make you some multiple of that. And it's very likely, unless you're a large company that just happens to be really old, because sometimes you have these like, yeah, what I would call like boomer companies that have horribly ugly websites
Mhm.
that have just lasted for 20 years. They may need a non-functional website that costs more because they're big and they have tons of pages about their various sectors and initiatives and bullshit, right?
Mhm.
Um, the moral of that story is though, at different levels of website, they're communicating different things, right? If you have an e-commerce website, it's communicating you can come here and buy stuff, right? If you have a, like a business card or a brochure website, like we talk about, it's communicating, hey, we exist. We're not fake. We're not going to steal your money. Um, we do the same things that we said on the sales call, right? Um,
Exactly.
so that's in a nutshell, different degrees of that. Let's go. I want to go more broadly in the last 20 minutes and talk about this is something Brian and I have been kind of workshopping that I think is what's up.
No, no, please go.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is something Brian and I have been talking about the last month or so that I think is really fascinating, which is what do we really do? What does Lucid really do? What we really do is not communication, but help communicate value. So value is subjective. People say this all the time. That is approaches being a buzzword. It's the same thing as like, time is relative. Like, okay, cool. Everyone knows the theory of relativity. Most people do not know what that means in a meaningful way, but it's become a buzzword. You could just say, oh, time is relative, and everyone's like, oh.
Mhm.
So value is subjective. The price of a bottle of water changes whether you are standing on a glacier, a convenience store, a rock concert, or the Sahara Desert, right? If you're standing on a glacier, you can go. I've done this. It is amazing. Go just take some ice and put it in your mouth. It is the best water. You can drink out of the glacier. It is amazing, right? Water bottle is worth negative money there because the water's much cleaner in the glacier, right? Convenience store, it's $1. Maybe it's 3 if you want to buy Voss or something fancy, right? Rock concert, it's probably $20 because they can scalp you, right? If you're at like Warp Tour in the summer, they're gonna annihilate you on the price. And if you're in the desert, it's worth infinite money because if you don't buy it, you're going to die, right? They can whatever amount of money you have in your pocket, and maybe that's not enough. That's how much it's worth, right? Did the thing that's being sold change? No. Did the packaging change? No. Did the name of the item change? No. But the context and nothing else, nothing about the bottle, it could be the same bottle of water, changed. The value changed, right? Value is subjective. Value is negotiated where the seller decides the ceiling and the floor of the price. So if I'm selling Brian a water bottle, I can start the bidding at $5 billion. I set the ceiling, right? The ceiling never goes up. Barring extenuating circumstances, which we won't talk about here, the ceiling never goes up, right? And the floor is what I'll take for it. Though it's the lowest price I'll take for it. I get to decide that. The floor is theoretically always zero, but it's going to be higher than that. So I start the bidding at $5 billion. And Brian says, that's ridiculous. I say, you're right. I was using the door in the face technique. It's actually only $50 for this bottle of water. And you say, you're an asshole. Get out of my house. Right? So we go back and forth for a while, and we agree that it's $2.50. It's a little bit of a warm day. Seems like it'd be nice, right? Great. My floor was actually $1. I would have taken $1, right?
Mhm.
So in that process, what you have to understand is the actual intrinsic value of the bottle of water doesn't exist. We can talk about what it costs to produce that bottle of water, but if the market for it disappears, you don't, let's say it costs 50 cents to make the bottle of water. Maybe it costs 5, I don't know. If the market disappeared overnight, if suddenly it was the ice age and there were glaciers with like perfectly clean water everywhere, the market value of bottles of water would dramatically decrease, right? This is a stupid hypothetical, but you get where I'm going with it,
It's okay. It's okay.
right? So, hey, guess what? This thing used to be scarce resources, now a commodity. There's no market here anymore. Okay. So now I could pay people to take my warehouse full of bottles of water away because I can't afford to get rid of them, right? I have to pay someone else to get them out of my house. There is no innate dollar value associated to anything because it's subjective and it's relational. And thus, while we just spent all that time describing the circumstances, there are other things that impact value. Communication is one of those. If you go to China and you find a factory that makes shoes, and part of this factory is run by Nike, or part of the products are Nike's products, and part of them is whatever the Kufandi, which is that Amazon dropshippy brand that I actually love dearly. I have tons of their workout stuff. It's very cheap, but it's like good. Like I like
Mhm.
it. Um, let's say they both make shoes, right? Which they do. Nike sells you Jordans for $250 or some crazy amount. I don't buy them. I don't know what they cost. I know it's a ridiculous amount, right? And then Kufandi sells you the same, functionally the same shoes, same materials, same structure, same whatever, for like $10 on Amazon, maybe 40. I think I bought like a cheap pair of $40 workout shoes at one point, right? They're awesome. Why are they different? The way that the brand communicates is different, even though the shoes are functionally made out of the same stuff, right? The perception, which is subjective in nature, changes. Communication changes the value of something, right? Which is stupid. I mean, this is the thing. You have to like get over the fact that it's like it shouldn't work like this. There should be what you want, and especially if you're a technical founder, this is what you're thinking. You're like, I don't like it. I know that the unit cost of me making this like widget is like $7 in machined aluminum plus labor plus whatever. So I should be able to sell it at a 40% margin. It's $20 for a widget or whatever, right? That's not how it works. That's not how it works. That's how
No,
your math internally where you determine your ceiling and your floor. But if I'm selling Brian a widget and Brian doesn't want the widget, it's worth $0. It's worth nothing. It may be worth negative money. Like I might pay you $1 to stop trying to sell me shit and leave me alone. Right.
mhm.
So that is troublesome, right? Similarly, if I told Brian, oh my God, this widget is actually gonna like make you a billionaire if you take it and put it into your car and your car starts to like it converts your fuel exhaust into gold, right? Gold dust, which you can collect and sell on the black market. Like, oh my God, wow, it's worth $1 million. I'll make that back in a weekend, right?
Mhm.
Now that depends on whether or not that's true, but the words, the connotation of that just changed the interaction. And what you can tell with this is, let's say, again, I'm never going to advocate for lying in messaging. You never want to be misleading at all. Um, But you can imagine two sales of the same thing where one person says one set of outcomes and one person says another, and the difference in price is actually 100x, right? Was it you that was no, it was the guy on the podcast I was just on, um, Christian. He said they did a study. They had like a room full of people, and they were all given a task to go sell some stuff, right? And what they didn't tell them the price. They said, go get as much as you can from other people in the room, like get an agreement for it. And what they noticed is that among the salespeople, it wasn't like a difference of like two times as much or 10 times as much. It was a difference of like 100 or 1,000 times as much between the best salespeople in the room and the worst, right? So a great salesperson could sell the same thing to a room full of people that know they're doing this exercise for 1,000 times as much because their communication was better, right? And ultimately, if you think about that chain of events from the person speaking, the words they're using, the medium they use, the way those words are received, and the internal concept in the mind of the buyer, that the manipulation of that chain through communication is what creates value, right?
Hmm.
That is the art. It's the freaky voodoo black magic witchcraft of communication because it makes things worth more in the eyes of other people, which is insane.
Yeah, I mean, there's a parallel that's coming from something that I've had to deal with in my career out of necessity. I think it mirrors it quite well here. So, like, I was a generalist for most of my career, and I was loved by my bosses. What I did, I was a great worker. People would be like, "This guy is phenomenal." I had great relationships, and I worked well in the company. But like, whenever I left, and I decided, and which I did rather frequently, I had to put together a resume. And even as a software developer, I didn't know how to talk about myself. Because even in software development, I did so many things. I did data analytics, I did BI reporting, I did infrastructure, I did some app work. Like I did all these weird things. To me, and it's kind of, and I talked to a lot of people, and again, I've mentored hundreds of folks in career changes. It's like I'm trying to capture myself, but I don't know how to apply to jobs because like they're only looking for like one thing, right? And that market's very interesting because they make it very explicit. We are hiring for this. We're buying labor for this price if you can sell it, but you need to fit into this very little box, right? And what you do. And people were very upset about that because I'm like, no, I'm also creative for writing, whatever. And like, oh no, I don't have the background, but I'm willing to work hard, right? They don't realize, no, no, you don't get through the front door, in which case the front door is the recruitment interview, the automated processes, anything you talk to before you actually talk to the manager. You don't get to talk about those things. They don't give a shit, right? They're on the outside. What I'm realizing is about messaging. Messaging that we're building is doing a very, very similar job, which is there's a bunch of buyers, and in their head, there's a front door that is locked, right? And there's a door that's locked, and they are not going to do it. You have to say the right thing and represent yourself however is necessary to get into that door if you want to have a discussion with that individual, right? Now, let's assume I'm making the assumption if you're talking to a room full of people, there's a 100% match, right, between what you're selling and what they're offering, right? So if you talked with them, they would be good.
Yeah,
In reality,
it's worth underscoring here that communication is not about the product. Look, we always assume when we're working with people that your product does what it says it does. That is not, that's a prerequisite, but it's not that important.
no, no, no. It's really the problem you're solving. And particularly for, and now we're not talking about now the startups we work for, again, they tend to be products or at least SaaS products that are really specific. But another group that we're starting to help is really service providers, right? Which again, what does service providers do? Well, we offer a lot of services and a lot of different things, right? Like I'm a technologist who helps build systems that's everywhere, right? Or I help with networking, networking problems or whatever. That's everywhere, right? So the problem is that if you go in and say you can help everything and I'm really easy to work with, you get virtually no flow. Virtually get no meetings because the people who hear that don't hear anything that unlocks the door that makes you go and think, oh, it's interesting. Versus specific pain points that they're dealing with is ending up being ends up being the thing that unlocks the door. And like I think that like basically the cheat code, the closest thing I found is to a cheat code to unlocking that door, right? Is stating clearly in a way they understand a problem that they are saying to themselves before they click on the door, a thing that they thought. There's two. In the exact question they're thinking, or the answer to the question that has been on their head to do this. And when it happens, like it's incredible, right? No one likes fucking cold messaging. No one has come out and says, "Oh boy, I want to be cold messaging." And yet I have sent messages and people responded back, "Wow, that is exactly what I'm thinking about right now. Let's talk." Right? Like I'm dealing with this problem right now. How did you know? They don't say, "How did you know?" They'll say, "That's phenomenal copy." I don't know why. What they're really saying is, "You nailed it, bud. Congratulations. You're into the next round," you know?
What they're really saying is, I trust that you have enough expertise on this because you understand my problem better than me.
Yes.
And thus we should continue talking because you sound like you might actually be able to solve it, right? Um, Something else that you said that I think is a phenomenal piece of copy on that note is we were in a meeting a couple weeks ago and Brian just like rattled this off as banger offhand, which is messaging. Trying out messaging is a lot like picking a lock. Like, and I don't know if you've ever watched The Lock Picking Lawyer, but it's awesome if you never watch him. One of the best people in the world. It's just the coolest thing ever. This guy who just talks in this nice monotone. He's like, "Oh yeah, this is a blah 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 lock, whatever, blah blah blah," and he just like opens it in 3 seconds. That's a bad example of lock picking because that guy is amazing, right? However, if you ever, like myself, have ever tried to pick a lock, what you actually do is you just shove the tools in there and you wiggle them, and then you get really mad. 20 minutes later, you can't do it, and you tell your dad like, "Why'd you give me the broken lock picking set? It doesn't work." Right? And that's what testing messaging is like. It's like you just try random shit. Nothing goes well. It's very hard to have a reference point. And then you get something that works. And having something that works is not like being really good at lockpicking. It's like having a key where you don't have to worry about if you're going to be able to pick it or not. The key just works every time. And the interesting part about having that key is that key works for that problem every single time you have someone in that ICP with that problem.
Yeah.
Done. You're just done, right? That is the most important part of messaging. And this kind of brings our thing home is if you have a statement that indicates that you have specific understanding of the innermost problems of your buyer, that person will flip out when they'll feel seen and able to be helped, and they will be interested in the next thing. So I think we should end on that note.
I think we should end on that note. All
All
right.
right.
Well, folks, thank you very much. We appreciate it, and we will be back next week.
Yep.
Not
Later,
sure what the
y'all.
topic is. We'll figure it out tomorrow. All right, take care, guys. Broadcast ended.